it's Orange Girl here, and I am here to show you a few things that I do when I'm using gelatos. Hopefully this will help those of you that are scared to get started using them, because they are so much fun. The gelatos that I'm going to be using today are called Faber-Castell. They're made by Faber-Castell, and I've got quite a variety of them, but there are tons and tons more out there. I'll also be using a water brush for part of the techniques that I will show you today. I will also be using just plain old generic baby wipes. These happen to be from Target. And another thing that I'll use some of the time is gesso. So when I very first got these and I was just kind of playing around with them, the first thing that I did is I explored in an art journal. And I decided, oftentimes when I use an art journal, I will just practice some things and see how they look, and then I may end up using that same technique on a layout. So what I'm going to show you here is something that I did when I very first was exploring using these, is I just made circles because I love circles and it just seemed so easy to do, and they're kind of messy circles, but they're circles nonetheless. And what I did was, sometimes I just kind of twisted them like this, and sometimes I went like this, and it doesn't really matter what you do. What I ended up, either way, it's going to end up looking around the same if you use this exact technique. Now, you can leave it like that. You can add a little water. You can rub it with your finger. Okay? So those are some different things you can do. I also liked using this circle foam brush, and I would just twist, and that was still kind of circly. You should clean it in between probably, and I'm not gonna do that for this project. So you can use your finger, you can add a little water to it, you can not add water and just do this. And this is just white cardstock. This doesn't have any texture on it. And you can see that I'm getting a little contamination here, and oftentimes if I were doing this, I would wipe this off in between, which is what I did when I used it for project. When I did use it for project, I used it with daubers, and so some of what I had was a paint dauber, and some of what I used was the gelatos. And like I said, the first time I did this, I did it just in an art journal just to experiment a little, and you can see, "Those who don't believe in magic will never find it" was my quote. And then I just wrote some things that were magical for me at the time. Okay, so that's one project that I did. In a similar fashion, I made the cover front and back for a mini book, and this I used the exact same technique. So some of this is gelato and some of this is dauber paint. And then here's a layout. So what started out in my art journal as just playing ended up into a layout. It's a pretty simple layout. I just made all these circles with either paint or with the gelatos, and I did use these, and you can see I used these, and you can see that I just wiped it off in between, so there's very little contamination. And then once I was finished with that, I also added some water to some of the some of the orange, and I went ahead and just flicked my water brush and made dots. Okay, so that's another thing that you can do with that. I went ahead and I did use some stamps over the top of it, and it turned out just fine. I did use Stays On ink for that. Okay, so there's just an example of it in use on a layout just from that very simple technique. Another thing that I'd like to show you today is using, making a background. And this is going to look a little bit more like a background that you might use for layering. You might use this, if I was making something for this small, I might use this as a card to layer things. I also might use it for a card. You also could use it you get the idea. I could color the whole background or part of the background. So I'm going to start with orange because why not? It's orange, right? And I'm going to add a little bit of color, a different color in there, and maybe even some pink. Okay. And depending on, you know, what your pictures are that you're going to use, or depending on what you might use for the rest of your pattern papers, that can give you an idea of what colors of gelatos to use. And then I am just squeezing a little bit, and I'm making this with water, with my water brush, and I'm just kind of playing with it a little bit. And you can see how it turned it into really pretty much a watercolor. The water, I'm not using very much of it. It's really important not to use too much in most cases because it does make your paper start to warp and different things like that. I don't mind it because usually, typically, when you end up using that paper, when you glue it down or when you add your other elements to it, you can't really even tell that it was warped, or it flattens out even as you go, or pretty much flattens out. So if I made this, I might use that for some sort of, well, this is a little too big of a picture, but you get the idea. You could put a picture over the top like that. So this could be matte, or imagine if this is a 12 by 12 piece of paper and I just did a few little spots like that, then I might be able to put the picture on there just kind of to frame the picture a little bit. So that's another time that I may use it. You could also use, not this particular size, but do something like this to make cards for PL, for Project Life. So that's another time that I have used it. If you want to, you can do the whole entire background in gelatos, and I have done that before just using my hands. Now, the first time I got this, remember, I did not have gesso, so I didn't use gesso, and I didn't have just very much experience with much of anything like creating my own backgrounds in any way. And so this was really my first experience with doing that. And so one of the things that I did on a particular layout was I decided I was going to start with white cardstock, and I kind of had an idea of some things that I wanted to make happen. And so I took some of these colors, and it wasn't these exact colors. They were actually things that I picked up at Paper Issues. I think they were called Tropical or something like that. I'm not sure that they have them right now, but they were 4 or 5 colors, and I put them all over the entire layout, and I did them kind of at an angle like this, and then I just blended with my hand, my fingers, okay? And so you can still see the strokes in there, right? But it's blended a little bit more, so it doesn't look like a crayon so much. It just looks a little more subtle, a little more watercolory, right? And I'm using my finger. I want it to blend together, so I'm not cleaning off my hands in between. If I wanted them to not blend at all, then I would clean them off.
Hi, Mama.
So the background I started out actually with this paper right here, this flower paper, which is kind of watercolory, and I loved the colors in it. And so I just went ahead and grabbed gelatos that matched sort of those colors. Then I blended with my fingers, mostly without any water at all. Then I finished off by using some StazOn, I believe it was StazOn ink, and some different stamps, and called it done. One other little thing that I did is sometimes I like to alter things that I already have using gelatos. And one of the things that I altered on this is the letters. The letters were those do-it-yourself ones. And this one actually wasn't, but it was a gray, and I didn't want gray. So I went ahead and I just colored using the same basic colors. I used the purple and that blue kind of color and yellow and pink, and I just colored right on it. and then blend it a little bit with water. Okay. Another thing that I have done before is that same sort of thing with wood veneers, and I just get it a little bit wet. Okay. And then go to town. Okay. Done. I now have wood veneer letters that are red. So that's another little technique, another way to use it. I've done that same use, that same idea where you take the water brush and you just put it on here to color in these hearts and these V's here. I loved this background paper, and I really wanted to use it with this photograph, and I loved some of the colors in there, and I wanted to pull them out here, so I just went ahead, and to be honest, I really liked this washi. And so I just took some of those colors and made my own background paper from an original. Okay, here's another way that I've used gelatos. I cut this word things out of just black paper with my silhouette, and I was using this Amy Tangerine paper that is very watercolory. She uses a lot of that kind of watercolory stuff, and so I wanted to mimic that a little bit. So I just took a piece of white cardstock and I did something very similar to this. I just put some stripes on there of color and used water to kind of turn it into a watercolor look, and I put that behind the word things. Okay. Another thing I did on this layout was, if you can see this paper right here, it's just black and white, and it says love, life, love the life you live, or something like that, or live the life you love. Maybe it's both of those things. Anyway, it's just plain white paper. Well, I wanted a little bit more color here and to stand against this black and white. And so when I cut this out, I went ahead and I put some gelatos around there, and then emphasized it with some white or some black marker around it, or pen, excuse me. Did the same thing here. Took that same white paper that I liked with the saying that I liked, that I thought really totally fit this layout, and it's mimicked here, right? And I just made my own tag, and then use the yellow gelatos to give it a pop of color. Gesso or not. So what I did to prepare ahead of time, and I don't know if you can see this or not, there's a line right here. This part right here does not have gesso on it. This part does. And so I'm just going to show you a couple little things so that you can see the difference and why you might want to use it sometimes and not other times. So I'm just going to take my orange, because why not? It's orange, right? And I'm going to go across it. And you can't tell this probably, but there is a little bit different feel. It's a different kind of drag when I go across where it isn't and where it is. Okay, so if I go ahead and I use my finger on this side, the gesso starts right here, and I do this, you can see the lines, right? I can still blend. It looks fine. And for some things, that's exactly what I would want. But this side with the gesso, you can see I'm getting more coverage. It's darker color and more true to what I started with. And so if I'm wanting that really dark color and I want it to cover better, you can kind of see I did not use gesso on this, and so you can see how I can see some of that white through there, right? But on this one, not so much. And that's because it's been treated ahead of time with that gesso, and you just put it on with your fingers, put it on with a brush, whatever works for you. So in some cases, I might want more of this look, and in other cases, I might want more of this look. Same with water. So I'm going to take, and we're just off because I did use red. And if I take the water, and I'm not using a ton, I'm going to get that gelato to spread even further I used a little bit. I didn't press hard, but look where it got me. Now, on this side, if I use a little bit of water, it's going to take some of those lines out a little bit and look more watercolory, right? And this I can make look as much watercolory as I want. Now, I'm pretty sure that's a real word. Okay, so you get the idea. To gesso or not to gesso, it's really up to you. And you can decide which kind of look that you want. Now, this last thing I'm going to show you is kind of magical. Okay, it's not the last thing, it's the second to the last thing. I'm going to use a little purple. Okay, you can kind of see just by putting it on there the difference between the two. And now I'm going to use my absolute favorite baby wipes. Okay, I use these probably more than I use anything else. If on the non-gesso side, you see how it's spreading. I'm so light here, so unbelievably light. But do you see how I'm spreading that clear out? And it looks very watercolory still. It's pretty, I don't want to say it doesn't have any texture, but it's pretty solid color. So there isn't a lot of variation in it, too much anyway. Same with the side with gesso. Okay, it's going to do the same thing, only once again, it's going to cover even further. You're going to get even darker look if that's what you want. I'm by using the white or the wipe, it can look like, now I'm trying to make it look a little bit more like watercolor by spreading it out enough that you can see some of that white in there, but I don't have to. So if I do this, excuse me, and it definitely looks more like paint, right? But I can make it pretty dark still, okay? All right. All right, last but not least, I'm going to show you this last technique, which is pretty fun. And this is what I've used with this latest layout that I'm going to share on the blog today. So I'm taking the gelato and I'm putting it on here, and I'm not rubbing super hard, but I am putting a good amount of color in a small space. Getting as close to the other one as possible. I didn't measure out my space very well today. Okay, so once I've done that, I'm going to take a wipe, just because I prefer it, and for each color I'm going to have a new spot on the wipe, and I'm just going to try to make that solid, fairly solid, okay? Blending a little bit, but I also want there to be definite spaces where this is definitely green, this is definitely blue, because of what I'm going to do next. Also, I'm going to try my best not to wipe off too much of it. I don't want to wipe it off, I just want to spread it around. So I'm definitely not pressing hard, and I'm definitely leaving as much color as I can on there. Okay, so once I've done that, now's the fun part. Take my water brush, and you could use a water brush for this, or you could just use water in a container and use just a regular old paintbrush. I am gonna kind of wipe this off a little bit, and then I'm gonna squeeze some water on these spots, and then, as you can probably guess by now, I'm going to make it look like there's paint rolling down. I'm going to help it along a little bit, mostly let it just go where it needs to go. More there. Alright, so I can add more if I want. I can just let it be done. I could totally see using this in a layout. In fact, I did, and so I'm going to show you that layout next. I hope that you've learned a few techniques here, and I hope that you will come back and comment and let me know what else you'd like to see, and I will also work on another video for you. But there are a few ideas to get you started, and good luck and have fun.